Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 61 based on novel. So let's start. In Qin Mu's team, other than him being an Imperial Academician, there was no directorate. Gu Linwan's reason was that since Qin Mu was an Imperial Academician and had a high official position, he should lead a team by himself. The scholars that were assigned to Qin Mu may be selectively chosen, the top-notch of scholars' residents, however, they were far inferior compared to the scholars selected from Royalties Park and Divine Arts residents. With strongest practitioners lying everywhere in Imperial College, there was no lack of experts. Gu Linwan making Qin Mu lead a team for experience was obviously using public office to avenge his personal grudge. The scholars going with Qin Mu to the front lines were all acquaintances. They were Chen Wanyan, Qin Mu, Yu Qinghong who brought Wolf Slave along, Sai Yunxiang and finally, Qin Yu. However, since Qin Yu was the younger generation of the capital city's Qin family, he had a deep background and found Gu Linwan to give him a word, thus he was relocated from Qin Mu's team to another team, which was led by a directorate, avoiding Qin Mu's sure death team. Qin Mu finished refining a furnace of scarlet fire spirit pills and stretched his body. He had been refining pills these few days to ensure that the dragon Chilean would have enough to eat when they reached the front lines, thus he had no time to meet those few scholars. Qin Mu found Chen Wanyan and Yu Qinghong to discuss with them. This time Grand Chancellor made Academician Qin bring us out for experience, and to a place of turmoil. I reckon we won't make it back, and will surely die. We don't even have a divine arts practitioner in our team. Chen Wanyan shook his head. We have. The few of them looked towards him. Chen Wanyan smiled faintly. I have been suppressing my realm these few days, so you guys can be at ease. I can break through anytime, and become a divine arts practitioners of 6 directions realm. Yu Qinghong said, I've heard that the sects that rebelled have already started gathering towards the south, wanting to completely rid Eternal Peace Empire's power in the south. Numerous sects that were active near the capital city had all vanished without a trace. For example, Dragon Rider sect, which had already moved to the south. Now the south of Surging River is completely the territory of the rebel army. With all the rebel sects gathered there, how many divine arts practitioners are there? With you being the only divine arts practitioners, they're absolutely no usefulness. Chen Wanyan frowned. Academician Qin's experience in the martial world is too shallow. He's too young, so how many times has he traveled throughout the martial world? With him leading us, everything points to disaster. No matter how high my cultivation is, I would be helpless. Junior Sister Sai, you haven't been talking. What's your opinion on this? Sai Yunxiang smiled shyly and didn't say a word. Everyone fell silent. Qin Mu sighed, it's better for us to choose 1 or 2 divine arts for escaping from Floor of Heavenly Records. It might just be of use. The day finally came for departure. In front of Hall of Supreme Learning, a few hundred scholars gathered and the directorates inspected their own teams. Ships then flew in one after another and landed in front of Hall of Supreme Learning. The directorates then led their teams to board their own ships. Academician Qin, didn't you hire a ship? Gu Linwan walked over with a beam on his face. This journey this time is pretty far, and if you were to walk there, you would need to walk for 10 days and more. You're an Imperial Academician, don't tell me you don't even bear to spend this little money. Qin Mu smiled with a calm composure, thank you, Grand Chancellor, for troubling yourself with our matter. I got nothing but money. Therefore, I have hired a fast ship with a high price, which would reach very soon. The furnace of the ship is forged by me, it's very fast. Chen Wanyan and the rest looked at one another in the eyes and thought, he's indeed petty, even the furnace is made by himself. I reckon it's a small ship. However, he actually knows how to forge artifacts. He has never been to Hall of Divine Craft, so where did he learn to forge from? There's Hall of Divine Craft in Imperial College, and they taught how to forge artifacts and treasures. The directorates of Hall of Divine Craft were also holding official positions in the Imperial Court. The supervisors of the shipyards and the armaments manufacturers were positions the directorates of Hall of Divine Craft must assume. Ever since Qin Mu entered Imperial College, he had not even been to Hall of Divine Craft once, therefore it was impossible for him to learn any knowledge on forging. Not long later, the ships started to fly up and left Imperial College on their own. Qin Mu and the rest became anxious as they waited, and suddenly, they saw a dilapidated ship sailing over shakily in the sky and landed in front of Hall of Supreme Learning wobbly. "Our ship is here." Qin Mu smiled. Chen Wanyan, Yun Qiu, Yu Qinghong all frowned hugely. This ship was already filled with holes and air was leaking out from everywhere. Furthermore, the mast of the ship was also broken and there wasn't even a sail. A burly man with bare arms appeared on the ship and had a fierce look on his face. With one look, they knew he wasn't any good person. He was covered in tattoos and he waved towards Qin Mu while laughing. "Old brother Qin, I'm late, I'm late." Qin Mu brought Hu Linga and the dragon Chilean forward with a smile. "It's fine even if you're 1 or 2 days late. What happened to your ship? It was still fine the last time I saw you. How did it become like this in just a few days? Don't talk about it. I did another trip and met those bitches of Three Wonders Castle again. They released their insects to harm me, but my speed was too fast, thus we crashed into the swarm of insects and almost turned my treasure ship into a sieve." Fan Yunxiao chuckled as he looked at Chen Wanyan and the rest. "Scholars, when you become officials in the future, please take care of me. I have turned good recently." Yun Qiu muttered, "With this ship being so dilapidated, will it fall apart when we fly into the air?" Qin Mu also had the same suspicions. This cloud-chasing pirate ship was simply too worn out and looked like it might fall apart anytime. It won't. Fan Yunxiao patted his chest forcefully and assured, "My brothers have already used runes to fortify the ship's body, thus it's extremely durable. Old brother Qin, can you help me forge an iron shell ship when you're free? You can help me refine 2 more furnaces and use black iron to forge the body of the ship. Wood is simply too brittle." Qin Mu pondered for a moment and replied, "That would require quite a high price. Just the black iron alone is a pretty large expense. Can you take out that much money? Furthermore, do you have the blueprints?" Fan Yunxiao rubbed his hands forcefully and said, "After robbing everywhere for these few days. Pooh, after doing business everywhere, I've saved quite a sum of money. If I add all my property together, it should be enough to make an iron shell ship. As for the blueprints, that wouldn't be easy to get. Everyone, please board the ship, we'll talk after we board the ship." Everyone boarded the ship and Yu Qinghong looked around. The mates of the ship were all covered in tattoos and looked fierce. Some even had scars on their bodies and some were missing a nose or an eye. With malicious aura leaking out from their bodies, they obviously didn't look like good people. This dilapidated ship gradually rose into the ship and slowly drove out of the capital city like an old bull pulling onto a dilapidated cart. Everyone looked at this situation and were even more dejected. Chen Wanyan whispered, "The people on this ship aren't good guys. They are villainous people who rob people, and they have extremely high abilities. Most of them are divine arts practitioners. Academician Qin has a shallow experience of the martial world and I reckon he must have fallen into the bandits' trap. We have to be careful on this journey so that we won't be robbed." Just as he said that, the dilapidated ship suddenly increased its speed and gave off a mournful whoosh as it broke through the air. Violent tremors came as the speed of the ship surpassed the speed of sound, crossing miles of distance in an instant. The few barrels of wine were flung away and exploded mid-air as they got smacked by the air. Everyone immediately stabilized themselves and looked at their surroundings in aghast. They saw this dilapidated ship soon passing by all the ships, which had already set sail a while ago, leaving these ships in the dust. The speed of this ship was so unimaginable. With this speed, they could reach Surging River in just a day or 2. Qin Mu was long used to it. After all, he was the one who had forged the furnace, therefore, there was no need to be astonished. It's fine, it won't fall apart." Fan Yunxiao consoled everyone and said, "I originally thought it would fall apart as well, but after ferrying passengers for a few trips, it has never fallen apart. It's likely not to fall apart this time." Whoosh! A peace deck board was lifted up by the gales and flew backward with a whoosh. Fan Yunxiao was full of confidence. Don't worry, it won't fall apart. Second brother, bring a deck up. Bring one more up. Another one was blown away. Relax, relax, I'm experienced. Suddenly, the ship passed a raining region. It was currently raining there as the ship passed through the downpour, turning Fan Yunxiao's body all colorful. Hu Linga cried out in astonishment, Old Xiao, your tattoos got washed off by the rain. The other bandits on cloud-chasing pirate ship also had their tattoos blurred by the rain, and there was even a mate who shouted, Big brother, my scar got washed off by the rain. Fan Yunxiao was also slightly embarrassed and said, when you disembark later, we can find painters to paint it back on again. However, we've all turned good, it seems there's no need for us to paint tattoos anymore. Second brother, take off your eye patch, you see, you've scared those few scholars. The second mate took off his eye patch, and revealed a perfectly fine eye. Monk Yun Q muttered, the appearance of these bandits doesn't look too reliable. However, Qin Mu was very close to the head of the bandits, and took out a computational cannon to consult Fan Yunxiao. Hu Linga found a handkerchief, and wiped the dragon's head on Fan Yunxiao's back, and the dragon's head instantly disappeared. Fox, stop fooling around, Fan Yunxiao waved his hand. Hu Linga pouted her lips, I thought they were real tattoos, so they were painted on. Fan Yunxiao gave a dry laugh and muttered, how painful is that? Our body, hair, and skin are given to us by our parents, how can we anyhow draw on them? Qin Mu said, Senior brother Fan, the sh, by, Qian, Wan in computational canon of supreme mystery is not a problem, however, Yi, Zhao, Jing, Gai, Zi, Rang, Go, Jian, Zheng, Zai, Ji. These numerals are really too huge, what are they used to calculate? Is there a need for such huge numerals? I've also asked Dao Master before and Dao Master said they were used for immeasurable calculation. Fan Yunxiao said, between Wan and Yi is the Wan system, Wan becomes Yi. After Yi is the Yi system. Yi becomes Zhao, Yi Zhao becomes Jing, Yi Jing becomes Gai. Other than that, there's also no end to division, what's used after a single number is Fen, Li, Hao, Sai, Hu, Wei, Xian, Sho, Chen, Ari, Miao, Mo, Mohu, Kunzun, Shuyu, Shunxi, Tanji, Chana, Liude, Kongshu, Qingjing. What they used are decimals. Fen is 1/10, Li is 1/100th, so on and so forth. Qin Mu was astonished and asked, then what's Kongshu and Qingjing used to calculate? To calculate the smallest particle in vital qi. Fan Yunxiao continued, the 14th writing of Dao Sword requires runes to be imprinted in the smallest particles of the vital qi. It was impossible to cultivate it without calculation. Qin Mu was dumbstruck and felt his head aching as he looked at the computational canon of supreme mystery. If you forge all kinds of treasures, you also need to use these calculations, and the slightest error could result in a world of difference. Qin Mu acknowledged and exclaimed in admiration, Dao Sek's attainment in algebra sure is extraordinary. He consulted sincerely and Fan Yunxiao told him everything that he knew. Fan Yunxiao had already cultivated to the 5th writing of Dao Sect, and had an extremely high attainment in algebra. Yi, 100 million, Zhao, 1 trillion, Jing, 10 quadrillion, Gai, 100 quintillion, Zi, 1 septillion, Rang, 10 octillion, Go, 100 nonillion, Jian, 1 undecillion, Zheng, 10 duodecillion, Zai, 100 tridecillion, Ji, 1 quindecillion. Fen, 1/10th, Li, 1/100th, Hao, 1,000th, Sai, 10,000th, Hu, 100,000th, Wei, 1 millionth, Xian, 10 millionth, Sho, 100 millionth, Chen, 1 billionth, Ari, 10 billionth, Miao, 100 billionth, Mo, 1 trillionth, Mohu, 10 trillionth, Kunzun, 100 trillionth, Shuyu, 1 quadrillionth, Shunxi, 10 quadrillionth, Tanji, 100 quadrillionth, Chana, 1 quintillionth, Liu, De, 10 quintillionth, Kongshu, 100 quintillionth, Qingjing, 1 sextillionth. Cloud-chasing pirate ship flew for over a day, and finally reached Surging River. The ship sailed up to the camp at the southern bank. Lizhu Prefecture had set up a massive military force along the river. The army had linked over 200 river camps, and there were numerous soldiers and horses. When they reached here, a fierce battle had just ended and there were ships rampaging on the river surface. Some ships were already destroyed and thick smoke billowed out from the burning masts and deck. Corpses floated on the river surface. There were soldiers scattering fishing nets on the ship, fishing the corpses out. They then hooked the corpses with hooks and hung them at the aft of the ship, intending to bury them after dragging them to shore. Qin Mu opened his green heaven's eyes and looked towards the opposite shore of the river. There was a dilapidated city on the opposite shore, and there were still sporadic fightings, because there was still all kinds of rays bursting forth from divine arts. However, they were only skirmishes. It should be the army of Eternal Peace Empire eradicating the enemies in the city. Fan Yunxiao slowed down the ship and gradually descended down towards the camp. There was a soldier who flew up to the ship to inquire, and when he knew they were the scholars of Imperial College, he immediately waved his flag and made the archers below lower their bow and arrow. The ship gradually landed in the camp, and Fan Yunxiao looked towards the sporadic fightings on the opposite shore with one black eye and one white eye. He then took a glance at Chen Wanyun, Yun Qiu and the rest before shaking his head. Old brother Qin, these scholars will only hold you back and not be of much help. With a battle of this scale, the few of you scholars are completely no help and it'll be difficult for you guys to survive. I'm leaving. When I find enough black iron and blueprint of the treasure ship, I'll come and find you again. After he was done, he made the bandits on the boat activate the furnace and flew away. Yun Qiu and the rest were demoralized and Chen Wanyun sneered, this person's ability isn't bad, but there's a problem with his judgment. A general walked over and asked, are you scholars from Imperial College? Qin Mu nodded his head and said, is Lisu Prefecture young magistrate at the front lines? May I trouble you to inform her? Just tell her River Dike County Qin Mu request for a meeting. That general was astonished and didn't dare to neglect his words as he hurried away. Not long after, the clanking sounds of armor sounded out, and everyone looked towards the source of the sounds. They saw a female general clad in armor walking over with a helmet under her underarm. She had a heroic look and her facial features were also extremely beautiful. Her face powder, eyebrow liner and red lips were unforgettable. She should have just come back from the battlefield and there were still bloodstains on her body. So it's little brother Qin Mu. Yuyuan Chuyu's gaze fell on Qin Mu and her eyes lighted up. The little brother, who walked out of River Dike County a few months ago, has made a name for himself. I've heard my elder brother mentioning about you and now you're considered to have stood above others. I'm also happy for you. Big sister, you flatter me. Qin Mu blushed with shame and said, I didn't tell big sister before that I was actually from Great Ruins. Yuyuan Chuyu said, when you had left, I was still thinking when there was a Qin family in River Dike County which could groom such an outstanding child. My elder brother sent a letter over and mentioned you later, and only then I knew you were from Great Ruins. Yun Qiu, Yu Qinghong and the rest were secretly astonished. Lisu Prefecture was the place of lodging for all imperial scholars that came out for experience. Never did they expect that Qin Mu was actually well acquainted with Lisu Prefecture young magistrate. Being the high official of such a place, she was already the commander of the borders. In addition to that, Yuyuan Chuyu had an extraordinary background. She was the princess of Yuyuan Empire back then, and the other crown prince of Yuyuan Empire was Yuyuan Chuyu, who had become the great general in the capital city. Qin Mu was clearly the abandoned person of Great Ruins. How did he get affiliated with Yuyuan Chuyu? Big sister Chuyu, what happened to Corpse Immortal Cult? Qin Mu asked. Corpse Immortal Cult has already been eradicated by me, but there are still some remnants that have escaped to the southern borders. Yuyuan Chuyu brought them to the city walls and said, the rebel army from everywhere have already gathered in the southern borders. There are also rebel sects from everywhere. All sorts of forces meet and mingle together here. The troops get stationed in all the cities along the river, and are taking strict precaution. However, this is just the tip of the iceberg and the current situation doesn't look good. Tip of the iceberg, everyone was stunned for a moment. Yuyuan Chuyu smiled, in the world today, do you know who is loyal and who is a traitor? For example me, I'm the princess of the vanquished Yuyuan Empire. How would you know that I would not rebel the next moment? Chen Wanyun and the rest broke out in cold sweat. afraid that this heroic-looking female general would kill them in the next instant and announce that she would rebel. Yuyuan Chuyu said indifferently, Imperial Court's relation to the old generations is too close. Imperial Preceptor wants to create a brand new generation on top of this foundation, but all he could use were always the power of the old generation. His new generation could not break free from the influence of the old generation, therefore who knows which sect or which official would rebel next. Monk Yun Q asked while shivering, but Lord Magistrate won't rebel, am I right? Yuyuan Chuyu looked at him and gave a bone-chilling smile as she said softly, you can make a guess. If you're right, you cannot die. Yun Q turned ashen-faced as he was scared witless. Yuyuan Chuyu, this commander, had nurtured a great grandeur around her. Even though she was a woman, her cold expression could crush a person with terror. Yuyuan Chuyu gave a gentle laugh and summoned a general over. After giving her instructions, the general immediately deployed an army with about 1,000 men. Yuyuan Chuyu walked down the city halls and strode onto the river surface. Behind her, 1,000 soldiers also strode over and stepped on the river surface as they moved to the opposite shore. Qin Mu caught up with her and stood on the river surface. Vital Qi burst forth under his feet, which held him up stably as he smiled, Big sister, don't scare him. Chen Wanyan and the rest also hurried over and executed their own vital qi to let themselves not sink into the water. They could sprint on water, but to walk calmly on water, it was slightly strenuous. Other than controlling the water, they also needed to have a dense cultivation. Yuyuan Chuyu was slightly interested, little brother think I won't rebel against the Imperial Court. Qin Mu shook his head, because this rebellion is a setup by Imperial Preceptor to purge the Imperial Court and the ordinary people. Big Sister is a wise person and could see that very clearly. If Big Sister was dumb, you would have rebelled long ago and not wait until today. Yuyuan Chuyu smiled, you're right and also wrong. The reason why I didn't rebel is not that I was clever enough. There were quite a number of people who came forward and urged me to rebel. They were all full of confidence when they came over, thinking they would definitely make me rebel, however, they were all wrong. My Yuyuan family doesn't value our royal position, we value our people of Yuyuan. When Yuyuan Empire was still around back then, Eternal Peace Empire had already become great and they could wage a war over any time. My father knew if a war was to break out, the empire would definitely be ruined and the families would be torn apart. However, Imperial Preceptor came to Yuyuan and discussed the path with my father. Back then, all the civil and military officials were there and what they discussed was how to govern an empire and their people. My brother and I were also at the Imperial Court. Then, we lost. Her expression remained calm as she said, we suffered a crushing defeat, which we accepted wholeheartedly, of the debate on the path of governing an empire and the path of people's welfare. My father relinquished the title of the emperor and allowed my elder brother to succeed him, but my elder brother didn't accept it and passed the title to me. She gave a smile. No now knew if she was mocking herself or if it was a genuine smile. I had told Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, I'm inferior to you in governing an empire, and I'm also inferior to you in looking after the people's welfare. In that case, I'll hand Yuyuan Empire to you. If your governance and people's welfare is not to my satisfaction, I will rebel against you in the future. Imperial Preceptor agreed and let me govern Yuyuan, which is also the current Liz Hu. So that's how it is, everyone suddenly realized. Hu Linga cried out astonishingly, sister, so you were actually a female emperor. Yuyuan Chuyu smiled and said, being a female emperor for a day, I can tell you, that's no fun. If you want to be an emperor, you can just find any place and proclaim yourself as the emperor. The only problem is how many people you can have jurisdiction over. She looked at the billowing smoke and fire on the river surface and retracted her gaze. She then smiled as she looked at Chen Wanyan and the rest, it's your fortune you guys are able to follow little brother. His abilities are very extraordinary. Yu Qinghong and Yun Qiu looked at each other and didn't know how this female general saw Qin Mu's abilities as extraordinary. Yuyuan Chuyu remembered the time when she had discovered the red corpse beetles scattered throughout the entire mountain, at the north of Tiger Sun County. Other than the red corpse beetles, there was also a skeleton, which had its flesh and blood melted away, leaving only the bones and the clothes. From the clothes, she could determine that it was an expert of corpse immortal cult. Even though she couldn't see who this expert of corpse immortal cult was, from the method of controlling the corpse beetles and amount of corpse beetles, that expert's cultivation had probably already reached 7 stars realm. Corpse immortal cult was proficient in corpses and poison, thus their cultivation realm was not that high. But when one clashed with corpse immortal cult, even people with a higher cultivation and battle prowess than them would find it very hard to defeat them. Yet this expert of corpse immortal cult had died from being poisoned, and the one that poisoned him would have been this little brother beside her who looked honest and naive. Back then, this little brother had even deceived her, making her write a travel permit for him and recommended him to go to the capital city. In Yu Chu's heart, for Chen Wanyan and the rest to be able to follow such a crafty fellow out for experience, they would be even safer than if they had followed the directorates. Therefore she had said it was the fortune of Chen Wanyan and the rest. When they reached the opposite shore, the buildings in this city on the opposite shore had already collapsed, killing God knows how many people. Yu Chu led the army into the city and said, "Just now I said this was just the tip of the iceberg. There is still another reason other than that. Look at this, taking down Deer County was a walk in the park. We easily invaded and took over this place, so aren't the rebel army a little too weak?" Qin Mu was slightly stunned, enticing the enemies to enter deeply. This is not only enticing the enemies to enter, the old foxes haven't even made their moves. Yu Chu's gaze flickered. The 3 old monsters that injured Imperial Preceptor still haven't appeared. The old monsters of the old generation might not just be the 3 of them. There are Passion-Parting Palace Master THG, the 3 Castle Lords of 3 Wonders Castle, high officials that have rebelled, Dragon King of Dragon Rider sect, and as well as other strong practitioners of the cult master level, and none of them have appeared yet. Other big and small cult masters, sect masters, are all very quiet. Furthermore, she said in a low voice, who knows if there are any gods that had survived from the old generation? Qin Mu gave a few cold shudders. Chen Wanyan and the rest also felt their blood run cold. Yu Chu obviously knew many things about the old generation, but she didn't delve into details. You guys can be at ease. These old monsters wouldn't easily make their move on the younger generation like you. Their target is Imperial Preceptor, and the first-ranking high officials of the Imperial Court. Deer County was seized by a sect not much bigger than Corpse Immortal Cult, which is called 9 Spectres Sect. Now that the rebellion in Deer County has just been quelled, and there are still some remnants from 9 Spectres Sect escaping, I'll give you an easy task: eradicate all of the remnants. Her gaze shone brightly as it landed on Qin Mu and the rest. 9 Spectres Sect is proficient in dressing up as God and playing the devil. They say they could invite supernatural beings forward to assist them in battle, therefore, you guys have to make some preparations. When the other scholars are here, you guys will go forward to eradicate them. Proficient in dressing up as God and playing the devil. Can invite supernatural beings forward to assist them in battle. Qin Mu was slightly stunned, and he suddenly thought of Soul Guide and Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command. These 2 spells were spells that were related to souls and supernatural beings, which were found by him on the first level of floor of Heavenly Records. Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command was from Great Mountain Sect, and as for Soul Guide, it was from 9 Spectres Sect. These 2 spells were placed in the first level of floor of Heavenly Records, because there were lesser people who would cultivate spells that deviated from the average. They were spells that belonged to the soul category, yet they didn't have much offensive power. Especially for Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command, this spell declared that it could dispatch ghost gods, yet when Qin Mu tried it a few times, it was at the most similar to the 5 ghosts transfer technique. However, it was much complicated. When Qin Mu found these 2 spells, he had once made Chancellor Ba Shan give him pointers. However, Chancellor Ba Shan also despised these 2 unpopular spells and didn't study them before, therefore he had thrown them back to him and told him to comprehend them himself. Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command might be similar to 5 ghosts transfer technique, but the runes were obviously much more complicated and required one to refine a talisman treasure. This talisman treasure was much more complicated than the one Qin Mu saw in Roland's golden palace. It was a completely different sphere, and had 1,024 irregular surfaces. On each surface had a complicated rune. Meanwhile, Roland's golden palace's talisman treasure only had 14 surfaces. It was exactly because Qin Mu saw the runes in Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command being complicated, he had thought this divine art was very powerful. Never did he expect its effect was only equivalent to 5 Ghosts transfer technique. He felt that Great Mountain sect might have somewhat concealed the technique, however, this sect had vanished from this world and no longer existed. Meanwhile, Qin Mu had also cultivated Soul Guide from 9 Spectres sect, but he had not tried out if he could succeed in guiding the souls of the dead back from the netherworld. The 2 spells had some runes that were similar, and both of them should be spells related to the soul category. Qin Mu bought some yellow joss paper, cinnabar and spent 2 days to create talisman treasure for Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command before spending another day to write down the runes needed for Soul Guide as well, comparing the both together. Comparing them with each other, Qin Mu finally could confirm that both Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command had mistakes. There were some runes among them that were purposely written wrongly. These sects were not willing to hand the spells of their own sects to the imperial court, therefore, they had purposely written a few runes wrongly, lowering the power of the spell drastically, or even making it unusable. The runes for Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command needed an extremely high amount of runes, so even when there were over a dozen mistakes, there were still over 1,000 correct runes. This was a huge treasure vault of knowledge. With this knowledge, Qin Mu could fix the wrong runes in Soul Guide. There were over 600 types of rune arrangements the Soul Guide required, and Qin Mu fixed the wrong runes that he had spotted. When he found that there was no mistake anymore, he immediately called a soldier over to ask, "Are there corpses in the city? I would like to test my spell." That soldier asked, "Lord requires the corpses of 9 Spectres sect to test your spell." The corpses of 9 Spectres sect were all buried, so if you need them, they'll have to be dug up. Qin Mu's face changed slightly and hurriedly asked, "Where were they buried?" That soldier replied, "We buried some in the disorderly burial mounds beside River Dike County, and the others were buried in Deer Mountain beside Deer County. We just buried the corpses that we fished out a few days ago at wherever that was close." Qin Mu's mind pounded and he hurriedly said, "Where's the young magistrate? Quickly inform the young magistrate, and let her order the whole army to be on guard before sending soldiers to the disorderly burial mounds and Deer Mountain to burn the corpses." The soldier didn't understand what he meant, but he still ran out in a hurry while shouting, "Young magistrate had gone over to River Dike County at the opposite shore to soothe the people. I'll head over right now to inform her. Big Sister Chuyu is at River Dike County. This is bad." Qin Mu summoned another soldier over and told him to inform the guards to be on alert before immediately finding Chen Wanyan, Yu Qinghong and the rest, and told them quickly, 9 Spectres sect might be making a comeback. Quickly be on alert. Chen Wanyan, Yu Qinghong and the rest were all beyond bewildered. Monk Yun Q asked, "The people of 9 Spectres sect are almost all eradicated, and only a few people are left escaping for their lives. Why do we have to guard against these few people? They are faking their death." Just as Qin Mu said that, suddenly, a faint singing came from the river surface. This singing voice sounded ancient and obscure, as if it was a god of the netherworld summoning the souls of the dead back. It gave people the feeling that a hazy and imposing god had opened the gate to the other world, sending the souls of the dead back from the netherworld. Qin Mu's face changed hugely and his footsteps sprinted like he was flying as he broke through the air, landing on the north gate of the city tower. The north gate of the city was empty, and there were only a few soldiers patrolling. Lizhu Prefecture's huge army had just experienced a huge battle, therefore, most of them were nursing themselves. Qin Mu looked towards the river surface, and only saw a daoist with a straw hat standing on a ship's mast in the center of surging river. He was currently casting spells and singing on the river, and a huge rune gave off a green glow, as if there were numerous green snakes wiggling in the sky. Yun Q and the rest came running over, and stood beside Qin Mu to look towards the river surface. Chen Wanyan asked, "What is happening?" Before he could even finish his words, he fell into a daze when he saw black fog surging over from the river. The area which the black fog had shrouded became larger and larger, wider and wider. Among the darkness, a towering gate could be seen at the heart of the river, floating above the water. In the blink of an eye, the sky turned dark. Qin Mu looked towards the opposite shore, and could faintly see a few ships that were ferrying the scholars sailed over. He then saw the darkness shrouded the scholars' ships. There was also a scholar's ship, which had reached the sky above surging river, which was also shrouded by the darkness. Shouts of anger and cries of astonishment sounded out from the ship, making it obvious they had met something unexpected weird. He turned his head towards Deer Mountain on the left of Riverside County. Riverside County suddenly burst open as small figures rushed into the mid-air, pouncing towards their location. The few soldiers who were guarding the west city gate of Deer County couldn't react in time, and were fixed in place by the yellow talismans used from the few figures that came flying over, slaughtering them on the spot. Boom! The west city gate blew wide open and the corpses rushed into the county city, slaughtering the guards who had yet reorganized themselves. These corpses were indeed corpses, but the corpses still had the souls of the dead. The Daoist on the river cast a spell and used Soul Guide to summon the souls of all the dead people in Nine Spectres sect, allow their souls to return to their body, and commence a sudden attack on the guards of Deer County. These corpses were all worn out. There were some that only had a piece of skin attaching their heads to their bodies, while some had a huge hole opened up in their chests. Some were missing their limbs and they all looked terrifyingly sinister. They were indeed dead, but their souls were pulled back from the netherworld and returned to their bodies, thus their abilities were still the same as if they were alive. Even Chen Wanyan was stunned at this sight, as he stood on the city tower not knowing what to do. Qin Mu looked towards Riverside County on the opposite shore, which was already shrouded by the black fog. Only the explosions of divine arts could be faintly heard. Abandon the city, we'll head to the east gate. Qin Mu made his decision. Chen Wanyan and the rest jolted back to their senses, and Qin Mu sprinted along the city walls while shouting for the Dragon Qilin and Hu Linga to return. Turmoil had already broken out in Deer County City, as everyone was caught unprepared and got killed by those corpses that were revived by Nine Spectres sect. The Army of Eternal Peace Empire was used to cultivate skills of combined assault. By cultivating the same spell or sword skill, 10 or more soldiers would just need to group up and work together closely for them to be able to even kill opponents a realm higher than them. These kind of battle techniques were extremely useful in a large-scale battle, which could be said that killing enemies was as easy as smashing rotten wood, resulting in an utter defeat for the sects which dared to resist. However, this battle in Deer County City also exhibited the disadvantages of this battle technique. 9 Spectres sect revived corpses to slaughter their way in the city, scattering these soldiers before they could organize themselves. Fighting on their own, the ability of these soldiers was much inferior to the disciples of the sects in the martial world, thus it was almost a one-sided massacre. The sky turned darker and darker. After these disciples of 9 Spectres sect were revived, the darkness was like daylight to them. They could see everything clearly, and they were not afraid of death. They were originally corpses, thus they couldn't feel any pain, and had no need to defend against the opponent's move. They could just pounce over and kill people directly. Furthermore, 9 Spectres sect as a sect, there was no lack of experts. Even the strong practitioners of Celestial Being Realm and Life and Death Realm were also revived. This kind of reviving wasn't a real reviving, and was just using spells to summon the souls of the dead back. These souls of the dead would still have to return to Netherworld, but in this period of time, it was enough for them to sweep away all the guards in Deer County. The guards of Deer County are finished. Qin Mu's heart sunk, and when he saw Hu Linga and the Dragon Qilin rushing over, only then did he let out a sigh of relief. Everyone immediately jumped off the east city gate, and ran away from the city in the darkness. Behind, the east city gate suddenly collapsed as it got shattered into pieces by the strong practitioners of Celestial Being Realm. Qin Mu turned his head to look back, and saw a general of Celestial Being Realm being torn apart by a few strong practitioners of 9 Spectres sect that got revived. There were still a few Taoists that were executing the yellow joss papers and walking in the sky. This made Qin Mu's heart sink. These few Taoists were the remnants of Corpse Immortal Cult. With the alliance of Corpse Immortal Cult and 9 Spectres sect, one of them would control corpses, while the other would control souls. There probably wouldn't be much soldiers in the city left. Academician Qin, we should cross the river and return to River Dike County. Chen Huanyun said solemnly. Qin Mu shook his head. There are also quite a lot of corpses sunk in the river. We can't return. Just as he said that, sounds of water traveled over from the riverside. Among the black-colored fog, the revived corpses walked ashore from the bottom of the river with water dripping off their bodies. When they saw them, they suddenly sprinted towards here. We can only head to southern borders and look for the chance to return to the north. Qin Mu had no change in expression, as he raised his hand to pat his waist. A sword light flew out from Taotie's sack and transformed into wave sword form. With the sword light revolving, it severed the heads of the 9 Spectres sect's disciples. The few 9 Spectres sect's disciples became headless zombies. They immediately bent over and picked up their heads, clasping them under their armpits, and continued to rush over. A head under the armpit of the corpse opened his mouth and shouted with a sharp voice, "Come quickly, there are some that have slipped through the net. Come quickly." Even though Yun Qiu, Yu Qinghong, and Chen Huanyun were quite knowledgeable and seen a lot, they had never seen such a sinister spell before. On the other hand, Cai Yunxiang, who was always shy and timid, was calm and composed. She was not the slightest afraid. Qin Mu spread his 5 fingers and gave a sudden squeeze. The sword light of Junior Protector Sword immediately turned into spiral sword form. The sword spun and sliced the disciples of 9 Spectres sect into pieces as he warned solemnly, "Move quickly, in case the experts of 9 Spectres sect catches up." The few of them quickly sprinted towards the darkness. Yun Qiu looked at the flames surrounding Deer County and felt slight fear and dismal in his heart. To the southern borders. That's the nest of the enemies. This video will end here.